My job as a game designer is to keep a game in a playable state as early as possible until the end of the design process. I think this is important because I think that a game is not really a game unless it's playable, right? Like if a game is not playable, it's more of a thought experiment or kind of an artifact of something that used to exist, maybe. But if it's not playable, it's not really a game. I think that the primary activity of game design is actually play. You have to play the game. You have to see it in action. You have to intuitively understand what's working about it, what makes it special, and what's not working about it, and that needs to be worked on. And so, since that's true for me, it's really critical for the game to be playable as early as possible and to stay playable the whole time. I have this temptation, this urge every single time that I sit down to work on something to go into the mind palace, right? The place where I can think theoretically about the game, I can write documents about the game, I could share thoughts about it with other people. And in the mind palace, assumptions can thrive. I can have delusions about the game. I can, just think, oh, it'd be cool if I did this, this, and this. And the pieces just kind of magically connect to each other in the mind palace because they're not tested. I don't have to reckon with reality. I don't have to reckon with how other people interact with this thing. And so all those little implementation details can just kind of like hide. And I can just think, okay, this would work really well. That's nice when you're doing kind of the initial ideation of a project, but really quickly you want to get rid of those assumptions, get rid of those gaps, and start understanding what are the implementation details, because without them, this thing is never going to come to fruition. And if this idea is any good, I'd like to know as soon as possible. This is something I learned a lot from my product management days. I mean, not my product management days. That's what I currently do. That's my day job. So my time in product management. We make software, and this is a really common practice with making software, where it's like, let's throw the boat into the water as soon as humanly possible. Let's figure out where the holes are so we can start patching them and figure out if this thing really works. Because if it doesn't work, if this idea is not actually that good, we don't want to go spend a bunch of time on it. We don't want to spend a bunch of time painting this boat if the boat doesn't actually float in water and the engineering is not fundamentally sound. So, in the early days, what that looks like is to get the game playable as fast as possible, understanding that the game probably is like kind of broken and doesn't even work yet. I often think back to, the first time that I sat down with Walter to prototype something. We wanted to make a game about spaceships. I don't even know why that was the thing that was interesting to us, but it was. And so we cut spaceships out of little, note cards, and then immediately had to address this question, which is, well, how far can a spaceship go? Well, that question seems to imply that there's spaces and maybe a board and maybe turns and a limit to what you can do on a turn. Are there other things you can do other than move on a turn? Immediately, we're forced to reckon with all these like necessary implementation details. And we had to make decisions about it. Of course, you can go back on those decisions later, you can redesign it later, but in order to get into a playable state, you're going to have to make a bunch of those decisions quick. I did this recently because I was thinking about this game that I've started to show on here, where I have lots and lots of cards. I have this giant box full of colored cards and old business cards and blank playing cards where I can just prototype really fast, because prototyping it and addressing those assumptions really fast is a much more efficient and effective way of getting your head around the idea than just thinking about it and taking notes on it. Because again, that's not real. That's not a game. That's not game design. Game design is like writing cards, feeling them, playing with them with your own hands, and having your own intuitive experience about how it actually works. So this is super helpful for at the beginning for kind of getting rid of a bunch of those assumptions and teasing that stuff out. And it helps you to understand, is this something I want to keep working on? Does this idea have legs? I've had plenty of experiences where I've gotten this far and I realized, this thing is like, there's so many gnarly problems and I'm not gaining energy. I'm actually losing energy. And I just like, maybe I could figure this out, but I don't really want to anymore. So by just kind of getting your hands on it and actually playing with it, you just will intuitively understand, is this a thing that has legs that I want to keep pushing on or not? And you want to get to that answer as fast as possible so you can make these really ugly little prototypes. And at this point, when I say play, I'm not even really playing it with other people. I'm basically having like pretending to be two people, just doing the basic mechanisms of the game to see like, is there anything here? Can I basically make the turns kind of hang together in some sort of loose fashion? And quickly from there, I moved to this new phase that I'm in where I'm actually printing things at like, Staples or FedEx or whatever and cutting cards with their big paper cutter so that I can actually start playing with other people because nobody wants to play a game where they have to read this handwriting on a horrible looking card. I have awful penmanship. But again, the temptation to go back to the Mind Palace doesn't just end magically once you prototype once. Because throughout the game design process, I'm constantly running up against this temptation to do these huge deconstructions, these huge redesigns where I'm like, I want to redesign these 4 different things, and actually they all relate to each other, so maybe I do them all at once. And I have this temptation again to just run off into the Mind Palace and think about the game for 2 months and maybe throw some stuff out, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait for this print to arrive, and actually this thing is changing and I haven't quite finished it, but I'm gonna need to go revise all these other cards. And all of a sudden now, for 2 months, if I've been just hanging out in the Mind Palace deconstructing, I don't have a game anymore. I once again have a thought experiment, and that's a big problem because I'm no longer doing game design. I am now merely theorizing, and this is a big problem. So throughout the game design process, it is still your responsibility to keep the game in a playable state. This also really matters for just like motivation too, because people will often, it'll just come up in conversation. People will be like, oh, you made a game. I'd love to play it. And if it's small enough, I'll be like, oh, I actually have it in my bag right now. It's not that good yet. I'm still working on it. This is an early prototype. It's ugly. It might break. You might laugh at me, but I do have it and we can play. Doing things this way, keeping it in a stable, playable state at all times, is really, really good for maximizing your opportunity to play it, which maximizes your opportunity for doing good design because playing it is part of design. It's fundamental to design. This is motivating, this is fun, and it's also dangerous, right? The Mind Palace is comfortable. It is a place where nothing really goes wrong. It's a place where all of your ideas are good and they all work together because you don't have to figure out those implementation details yet. That's really helpful when you're ideating, but it's actually a really not so great place to stay if you want to actually do design because you're not actually playing in the Mind Palace. So when you go out and you test, you are risking ego threat, right? You're risking things going wrong. You're facing the cold winds of reality. You might be embarrassed. You might have to preface a lot of these playtests like I often do where I'm like, this thing is so early that it's not even going to be fun. Let's just get going. And halfway through it might break and I might say, we got to quit this thing halfway through because I got to go fix some stuff. That's okay. It's dangerous. It's less comfortable, but you have to keep forcing yourself out there in order to figure out if your game is going to work. Some quick thoughts of like stuff to do that has been really helpful for me on how to do this is prototyping, having some sort of way to prototype really rapidly, having this giant pile of blank cards and a Sharpie around. And I have a bunch of Sharpies and a clipboard here. That is really, really helpful for me so that as soon as I start thinking and I find myself just zoning out, it's like, no, write cards. Don't just live in the Mind Palace. I also have I'll link to a separate video that I made about how to prototype. Once you're in a kind of a further along phase where you're printing things off, I have a really good way to rapidly turn Google Sheets into player cards that you can print really easily. And I can link to that video here. I also think like not getting too hung up on like making things pretty. So this is a game that's much further along, this game with these tiles, these hexagon tiles, and they're really cool. And I realized that I needed to totally change one of them. And I just wrote over it with pen because I was like, you know what, waiting for this tile to arrive in the mail is going to take forever, but we can prototype a lot faster if I just do this in pen. And lastly, I think just trying to make relatively smaller changes has really helped me a lot. You get into these long cascading effects of, I want to do this and then I want to do this, and that's going to make me rewrite all these cards and I got to rethink this whole mechanism over here. And that's how you end up going into the Mind Palace for 2 months. Avoid that by making much smaller changes. Identify the things that you need to fix in your game. Focus on the biggest one and freeze everything else for a time. Even though you're looking down the road and you're going, I need to also change this. I need to also change this. I need to also change this. Try to just set those aside for now. Let them be bad and try to fix this one most important problem. It could be that some of those just go away or you end up not even having to fix them or whatever. But try to fix one thing at a time, because this is going to make it so that you could make that change hopefully just within a few days, and then your game is still playable the next weekend, which is really, really critical. Your job is to keep the game playable. Play it all the time. This is how you do good design. Give it a shot.